So I was wondering what I would talk about today, and I was scrolling through the news like I normally do, and there's a lot of stuff that I've seen lately from the World Economic Forum, the things that are being discussed there. Uh, some of it seems pretty, concerning to me. Well, granted, everything these people say is concerning because they have money and power or influence, as some might call it. So yeah, the things that these people do, the things they talk about, they try to implement across the world basically. And so I thought it'd be worth making a video talking about some of the things that they've been discussing at their latest conference over in Davos, Switzerland. So, for the first story I pulled up is from Breitbart. Title: World Economic Forum. The spokesperson there says that the United States is soon going to have hate speech laws, or they're going to try to make it illegal. It's what the current EU commissioner has said. And that's pretty concerning. I mean, there's obviously the whole battle in the culture war, free speech versus hate speech going on. The whole thing with, I mean, it's just hate speech in itself is a ridiculous thing. I mean, really, it's the problem is who's defining what hate speech is. What groups are you protecting with hate speech? It's obviously just a way to undermine free speech. I don't see any other way of interpreting hate speech other than that. And the idea that hate speech laws will be coming to the U.S., well, that's concerning. And then you have Sheila Jackson Lee, a Texas Democrat, who's introduced a law. Where is it? It was somewhere in here. Yeah, basically a law that's been introduced to try and prevent people from talking about or from inciting people to violence, I guess you can say. I guess it's not in this article, but for those of you who don't know, Sheila Jackson Lee's from Texas. Her district is in Houston. She's actually got a bit of a reputation in the city. May seem kind of odd, but whenever there's like some sort of public event or something that's going on, she's always there. Like it's like if there's a half marathon or a marathon going on, she's there. If it's a disaster, she's quick to put herself in front of a camera. From people that I know who are in Houston, that's what she has a reputation for. She's pretty good at getting herself out there in a public image, I guess you can say. Pretty, I guess you could say, well-known person for Texas politics. Anyhow, she's introduced a bill to the House of Representatives to basically criminalize or make illegal people who say things that are deemed white supremacist and then have people who go and act on that. It's basically just a law that's trying to ban stochastic terrorism, which is another stupid linguistic invention. But yeah, basically anything that they deem to be white supremacist, then they're going to try and punish people who said those things. Well, yeah. So if you say something on the internet and then some random crazy person goes and everybody thinks they acted on what you said, well, you're held liable for that. And that's pretty ridiculous. I mean, yeah, crazy people do crazy things. Doesn't mean you should hold people accountable for that. And the whole thing with white supremacy and wokeness is that, well, wokeness has its own definition of white supremacy. I mean, you saw what come out of the Smithsonian, for example, with that old pamphlet. I don't have that pulled up right now, but they were saying things like a hard work ethic was white supremacy, or showing up on time was white supremacy. Just absolutely ridiculous things. But no, one of the people that's come up in this whole thing has been Elon Musk. He had a whole Twitter poll where he was asking if the World Economic Forum should be controlling the world. Obviously, his followers said no. I wouldn't expect them to say yes. Like, there was an overwhelming no. And based off the kind of people that Elon Musk, you could say, has been catering to or skewing towards, or I guess you could say in league with, but that just sounds kind of weird and dumb. But no, he's definitely not on the, I guess you could say, the establishment side of things. He definitely seems to put effort into trying to represent himself or be on the side of populists. And his ownership of Twitter has gotten him into trouble with the EU. I mean, back when he first took over, he shut down the office in Brussels, which is where the headquarters of the EU is. Apparently, the EU took this as a bit of a slight, but they're kind of a censorious organization, so what would you expect? The EU recently passed a law, I think it was in this source. Where is it? Yeah, right here. The Digital Services Act. Basically, the whole idea is that they're trying to prevent the spread of disinformation and hate speech online. So according to this, the Digital Service Act, which came into force in November, greatly expanded the ability of Brussels to police so-called hate speech and disinformation through the addition of punishment mechanisms against internet platforms that fail to abide by the bloc's rules. So, if Twitter doesn't really abide by the regulations and rules of the EU, then they're going to start enacting some sort of punishment on them. And I think that's some sort of financial thing imposed. Yeah, they're going to impose fines of up to 6% of their global revenue and even possibly ban the platform altogether. But that's, I don't know. It seems like you could probably call their bluff with that one. I mean, Twitter is basically the platform for political and for politics and news. I'm not sure how they could try and ban that. Good luck if they think they can, but I don't know, maybe they can. Granted, that would kind of suck for Elon. That would be, I mean, sure, the EU would struggle for a bit in terms of trying to find a replacement for Twitter, but that would hurt Elon more. So I guess that's a pretty powerful move and all. But, Elon does in fact control Twitter. He can run the algorithm however he sees fit, and he can probably, I don't know. Not that, it's a bit corrupt to try and manipulate an algorithm to change the results that you want. The algorithm should be made as fair as possible, but I don't know if anyone's really that morally virtuous who manages to send that to that kind of level. I don't know. Not something that I can really speak to. I don't know Elon Musk. I don't know his intentions. I don't know if this stuff is really a big threat to him. I'd imagine it'll try to be used against him at some point in time. Probably going to be some sort of a scandal in Europe over this. That's what I'd imagine, personally. But no, the stuff going on at the World Economic Forum is pretty crazy. Oh yeah, we have another one thing. The former Prime Minister of the UK, he wants a vaccine passport system. That's lovely. Yeah, I'm sure everyone's just really eager to see their private medical information have to be required to be presented to go into things like bars, restaurants, movie theaters, etc., or just have a normal life. I mean, it's kind of crazy if you ask me. I don't think that should be allowed, but that's what this guy is basically advocating for. And boy, does that sound a bit scary. I'm glad it doesn't exist, but it seems like there are people out there in the world who want that to exist. I mean, China's already has something that's pretty much like that. And this guy in the UK government, he wants that. I'm glad not in the UK. I hope it never comes to the US. But again, these are people who are speaking at the World Economic Forum. If they're speaking there, then their ideas can't be that out of line with what these people think. I mean, this is what the World Economic Forum is kind of championing. They're advocating for this stuff. They're cheering for it. They wouldn't invite him there if they didn't know what he was going to say. I'm sure the World Economic Forum is all behind this kind of stuff, and I'm not a fan of that. I think your medical information should be private. And over your fears of COVID? Come on. Look, I don't wish anybody to get COVID. Getting COVID can suck. I caught it. It sucked. Get body aches. It's not comfortable. Granted, I had a pretty mild reaction. Some people have a pretty terrible reaction, and that's also unfortunate. But this thing, when you look at the actual statistics of the death rate, it's less than 1%. It's really not that dangerous. I don't think we should be taking it, not to say we shouldn't be taking it seriously, but it seems as though the reaction, government, media, it just seems like it's an overreaction. It's too much the opposite direction. I think people need to calm down, or we're basically just turning into a nation of hypochondriacs and germaphobes. I mean, I'm not saying that you should go and spread the illness willingly, but my God, you don't have to. It's not the end of the world. You're going to live. Everyone will live. I don't understand. It's a strange medicalization of society. I don't know why. I was taking a German history class, I guess not that long ago, and we were talking about how the Nazis came to power. And to be honest, I don't really like it when people start making random comparisons with history, especially when they don't know very much about the subject. I mean, this is the kind of thing where the more you study a subject, the more you get kind of frustrated, annoyed, or kind of just exasperated with people who just kind of endlessly reference it. But there was an effort in Nazi Germany in order to help improve the health of the overall German population. that was through things like eugenics. And they would use medicalized terms. It was essentially a giant medical, not conspiracy, but effort on the Nazis' part to racially cleanse their country, which is pretty terrifying. And I don't think there's an effort to racially cleanse the world right now. But what I do think there is there's an attempt to, I guess you could say, rid the world of which is a pretty mild disease. It's really not all that dangerous. This whole thing with the forced vaccinations, the obsession about masking, the fear of going outside and catching COVID. It's some sort of like a mass hysteria. I don't know how to explain it other than that. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not the smartest person in the world, but people are losing their damn minds over this kind of thing. But that's just the unfortunate reality of what it is. Moving on. Oh yeah, the 15-minute cities that these people have been talking about. So the World Economic Forum was to create these 15-minute cities where people can essentially just kind of live together in these very condensed urban sprawls where everything you need in order to survive is relatively 15 minutes away. At most. At most, it's a 15-minute walk, not even a drive. And on the surface, that sounds pretty good. It sounds like, how villages in the past might have been structured where, you have an entire community of people closely grouped together. Everybody really kind of knows each other. You want to go to the store to get some food. You know the guy by name. It's right over there. It's not very far away. On the surface, it sounds kind of nice. But there is a problem of how do you manage to reorganize cities in such a way where you can accommodate that kind of thing. Now, I was reading this article, and granted, in Europe, that may not be quite as hard as I'd imagine, just because of the history of these cities. Take the United States, for example, where I obviously live. If you listen to my voice, you might be able to tell it's kind of an American accent. Probably most of the American people will be watching this because I talk about things that normally would affect Americans. But take, for example, like any major city in the state of Texas where I live. It's all massive suburban sprawl. Maybe you could do like a 15-minute drive at most, but even that's pushing it. Eventually, you're going to have to cross that threshold. It's just, the state of Texas itself is basically like the size of a country. We're bigger than France. Kind of a big deal. And what you have Dallas, the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you have the Houston area, Austin, San Antonio, all massive sprawls. I've been to all of them. I've seen them all. All massive suburban sprawls. It's just that. It's quite literally, if you live in that part of the country, you need a car to get around. There's just no other way to do it. If you live in New York City, like people who will live in New York City, they can go their entire lives without needing a driver's license. Why? Because when the city was built and designed, it was designed for people to walk around and go do stuff. It was originally designed with horse carriages and people walking. When cities like Houston exploded, well, automobiles were the main form of transportation. So what did you get? Well, you got big parking lots, you got retail stores, you got suburban sprawl. That's just how it happened. And there are other urban areas in Texas that are like that. You can go out to El Paso. I've only driven through there, but it seemed fairly similar in the short time I was there. You have Corpus Christi, not as populated, but similar. And when you go to smaller towns, it's the suburban plan or model is what's constantly used. So you can see new suburbs popping up quite a bit. A lot of people are moving to Texas, so that's a factor in helping to contribute to new homes that get built in the state. But when you look around, Texas is suburban sprawl. There's obviously a lot of, I guess you can say, rural areas. You have your dense urban areas, but when you look at where I'd say the majority of the population lives, it's probably mostly in the suburban area. That's just how it's structured. And I think they mentioned that in this article as well when you scroll down for a ways. Yeah, they mentioned in the United States this would be a problem because, I'm sure, I've been to other places in the United States. There are suburban sprawls in places besides Texas. So when the U.S. has the advantage of having lots of land. And when it got built and developed, it got turned into suburban sprawls. a lot of it did. I mean, this was back in going back to the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. That's when these suburban sprawls came around, and they were a huge factor. And there's a number of historical reasons as to why so many people were able to afford homes. I mean, you'd be going back to things like World War II and the GI Bill, how that helped veterans get loans, which helped them start small families. They got themselves a house. There's a number of factors that help with the suburban sprawl, and I like the suburban model. It's a fairly decent decentralized kind of structure, I guess you could say. I mean, it's not as decentralized as a rural area, but I don't know. I like the suburban model. Not that it's perfect, but it's what I grew up with, and it's what I know, and it's just what's familiar to me. And so the whole idea of the 15-minute city, while it sounds nice on one aspect, and the other aspect, it seems like a bit cramped. I mean, they want to do like this three-dimensional model for the city that looks kind of weird. And I guess you could pull it off, but you'd essentially have people living in cramped little cubicles all on top of each other. I mean, it's just kind of strange. I mean, I had a family member once. Yeah, I once had a family member. So on my mother's side of the family, we have family that goes back to France. And she lived in France, and she lived in New York for a while, and then she came to visit us over here in Texas. And afterwards, we actually visited her sister in New York City, and yeah, both times there were comments exchanged about the wildly different size of the living conditions, where over here in Texas, you get, a house that's of a much more spacious. I mean, kids can grow up with their own separate rooms. And that's like a pretty, not a pretty standard thing for middle class. I mean, growing up, I shared a room with my brother, but there was an extra guest room where I could have moved into, and I didn't for reasons. But it's not uncommon or unheard of for a kid in a house with a mother and father. There'd be like 2, maybe 3 kids where you can get your own room. That's a relatively common phenomenon. I can't speak to what urban lifestyle's like because, well, fortunately for me, I never had to endure that. I'm not sure that's necessarily the kind of lifestyle I would enjoy. But yeah, where is it? Problems. They mentioned it somewhere here. Yeah, what's not to like? As it turns out, the concept doesn't always fit. For one, the 15-minute neighborhood doesn't always work out so well for a suburban nation like the U.S. Yeah, obviously. It's easy to envision for cities like Paris, Copenhagen, Barcelona. Yeah, totally possible there. Not so possible in parts of the U.S. like this. And there's also the issue of, money, wealth, disparity, I guess you can say. I mean, according to them, it's easier to accomplish for the wealthier parts of cities. So I guess that the poor people get screwed over in your futuristic vision. Not that everyone wants a part of it. I don't know. But yeah, moving on. Other things that happened at the World Economic Forum, we also got to hear from our FBI director, Christopher Wray, talking about the level of collaboration between the private sector and the government, especially the FBI. Yeah, all those significant strides. Yeah, that's pretty concerning to me. Because we've seen, I mean, I don't know, some people have been paying attention to the Twitter files. I try to keep up with it as best as I can. Elon did in my opinion, a pretty bad job of releasing it to the general public. I mean, the way he released it turned into pretty much a dead story almost instantly. He kept releasing the stuff on weekends when no one's really paying attention to the news and not as much news is being made. And he'd release it at night when people are, at home with their families eating dinner. This stuff should have been released in the mornings, on Mondays when the week starts. Really get the news cycle going, and it should have been distributed to a lot more people. I think the documents should have just been made open source. Anybody can look in there, anybody can see what's going on, and then make their comments. Instead, you give it to a small handful of people who have to dig through these things in order to come up with the stories themselves. Yeah, I don't know. It was in my opinion, it could have been handled better, and it could have had a larger cultural impact if you had just released it a better way. But they didn't. And also, the FBI is pretty concerned about the kind of technology that other people are getting. Of course, when they have it, not a big deal. When other countries get it, or people that they consider to be enemies of the state, well, then they get very concerned. And we've seen how honorable the FBI is, so yeah, that's just more FBI, I guess you could say, corruption or playing dirty games. Oh yeah, and here's another thing that happened at the World Economic Forum. There was a Republican that was talking about. She didn't say give amnesty to illegal aliens, but that's basically what she was. I guess you could say crop dusting or advocating for or slightly pushing. I mean, she specifically says this woman. What's her name? Maria Salazar. Yeah, she specifically says that she didn't want to give them a path to citizenship. She wants to seal the border, but she wants to make them dignified members of the community. Okay. So these people they broke the law by entering the country illegally. And just what? You're going to ignore the fact that they're here? You're going to try and treat them with some level of dignity? What's dignity supposed to mean here? That I don't spit on them as I pass them in the street? Yeah, I'm not going to do that, obviously. There's a certain amount of respect that every human being gets. But we're just not going to enforce the law and ignore the fact that they're there, that they got here illegally, or they're just going to live the rest of their lives here as illegal citizens? This is like a do-nothing approach that... It's basically turning a blind eye to a problem. There's 15 million people that are here illegally, and we're going to act as if it's not a problem. I saw a tweet from Jesse Kelly earlier saying that the most lukewarm Republicans or the softest Republicans come from, I guess you can say, the deepest red states. And he mentioned Texas as being one of them. Well, unfortunately, Texas looks a lot more like a leaning red, almost purple state. And there are reasons for that, but, hopefully that can be reversed in the future, but we'll see as time goes on. But it just seems kind of dumb yeah, I do get what he's saying, though. A lot of soft Republicans come from relatively safe seats where they don't have to worry about ever losing, which doesn't make sense. You'd figure that those Republicans would be the farthest to the right where they're advocating for a very, very right-wing base, and so they want to use the most populist policies possible. And that the others, the lukewarm Republicans, they'd be the ones that come from the purple states or the purple districts. Yeah, well, that's not exactly how it seems to work. Strange, though. I mean, it's part of the reason why she's saying this is because apparently her district is heavily Hispanic. But that just seems kind of dumb. And she's Cuban American, so that's another thing where the Cubans generally lean Republican. So, not sure what she has to be afraid of. And even in Texas, when you look at border districts, their voting patterns are changing. They're going Republican for like the first time in like 100 years. This is not the time to be backing down on these issues. Everyone's recognizing the problem of illegal immigration. Now is the time to strike while the iron's hot. Do something. Stand proud on your issues. Instead, you've got so many people who are just... I wish you could get some people who are unrepentant conservatives. These people are unrepentant cowards. Meanwhile, over at the World Economic Forum, you have thousands of prostitutes who are going to Davos in order to, I guess you can say, solicit business from the powerful elites that work there. Isn't that a beautiful thing? These people who... They want to design 15-minute cities to ease the burden on the planet and consumption of goods and resources and energy. They have no problem soliciting business and excess from these prostitutes, a life of moral degradation, you could say. But for the same time, they demand that you adhere to all their strict tenets. They fly to the World Economic Forum on their private jets, with unrepentant use of fossil fuels in order to get there. And then once they get there, they demand that you have to be the one who has to make the sacrifices in order to help us ensure a better planet. These people buy beachfront property while also talking about how the sea level is rising. These people are just corrupt hypocrites. I mean, I wouldn't have let them within a 10-foot radius of a seat of power. Probably 1,000 feet, to be honest. But fortunately, they have the money, they have the means, and they get to do whatever the hell it is that they want. And that's a problem. Yeah, getting them out of power is going to be a big problem in the future. I don't know, maybe not so hard. When you look at the ages of some of these people, boy, are they pushing the envelope in terms of what human lifespan is. I don't know. Maybe in 6 or so years we start seeing these people drop like flies. I mean, was it last year, 2022? We had Queen Elizabeth die, Mikhail Gorbachev, and other. Oh yeah, we also had the former Pope who died recently. A lot of old people die. Maybe eventually you just have a changing of the generation. You'll get some fresh blood in there. They'll have better ideas, and hopefully that would help change the course of human events. But I don't know. My guess is that would be that even if you manage to change them out, you're still gonna have corrupt people who run the place. Yeah, you need to have some way of kind of, I guess you could say, rendering the World Economic Forum impotent in terms of enacting policy on other nations. Which brings me to my last thing I want to talk about, this nice little thread from Michael Knowles, basically kind of summing up in this one tweet what the World Economic Forum is all about. So I'm just going to go ahead and read it. The World Economic Forum is currently hosting its annual meeting of globalists in Davos. They aren't meeting to braid each other's hair. They are meeting to make decisions about our lives and our children's lives. I'm paying attention, are you? Well, I'm trying to pay attention. That's why I'm doing this, I guess you could say, fairly regular news show. I want to be able to pay attention to this kind of stuff. I want to be able to talk about it. I want to be able to be, I guess you could say, somehow involved. I don't know. I'm just one random dude, but, I'm here, I'm paying attention. Guess I'm doing something. If everyone puts in a little bit, maybe eventually you can change the world. I don't know. Here's to hoping, I guess. But no, I'd seriously encourage anyone out there who has Twitter, or even just open up a internet search. You could probably read this, where you could just start this thread from Michael Knowles, where he talks about safety by design, how it's being implemented within the World Economic Forum, the Australian government. These are all important things to be familiar with. Yeah, this woman over here, Julie Grant, seems like a pretty crazy person. Wouldn't really want her implementing her designs. But no, that's about it for today. Thanks for listening. If you did, consider liking and subscribing. Go ahead and have a nice day. Bye.